Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Anderson, and today is the big one. We're going to be taking a look at the Evangelion Union Arena English version set and the meta, or at least my meta predictions, for the post-Evangelion Sword Art Online Volume 2 world. So the entire card list has been revealed for both Sword Art Online Volume 2 and Evangelion. And now that we see everything, it really is not super surprising to me that the Union Arena developers would choose to release these two sets simultaneously. It's hard to imagine any other set pairing to be so ideal, as these decks are just so strong. And they really are going to bring a massive change to the Union Arena English meta. It really won't look at all the same. There will be some familiar faces at the top, but the top decks are going to change, perhaps in a bigger way than we've ever seen before. So the whole meta is really just about to shift in a very big way. And ultimately, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the meta has been super fun. I've been playing competitively last couple months, been already stocking away a bunch of winter cards for 2026, and the meta is admittedly very fun right now. Although, as we have seen from several large tournaments, it's been very skewed in favor of certain decks, and it will be completely different once these two sets come out. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at the decks that are coming out in Evangelion. I already did a video on the Sword Art Online Volume 2 decks, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure to check it out on the channel. I'll put a link to that episode in the episode description as well for this episode. We're going to take a look at every single deck that's coming out, and these decks that we're going to be taking a look at are really aimed at being the perfect starting point for you to build your own deck, customize it, test it. I, myself, even after I've essentially proven a deck, even if I've won a decent-sized tournament with a deck, I'll still go and tinker with it some more, because I am somebody who is always looking to optimize everything, and that's the same for my Union Arena decks. That being said, there has been a lot of research that has gone into putting these decks together, everything from talking with players involved in the Japanese meta, as well as testing and things like that. So these are going to be a really strong starting point, but I do encourage you to make your own changes and iterations to these decks to fit your play style, your meta, or even just some whatever cool ideas come to your mind. With that being said, before we get into it, I do also think it's worth talking about something that has been getting a lot of notice, and that is the two cards that were cut from the Evangelion set. And we already knew, before we even knew that we were going to get these cuts, I had assumed we would get cuts because I was monitoring how the Evangelion was doing in the Japanese meta, and it just seemed to be so overwhelmingly powerful. I assumed we were going to get some changes when it came to the English version, and it was essentially confirmed that a couple cards would be cut by the set list numbers. Now, the two cards that were going to be cut, we didn't know, and we just found out when the full set released. You can see the full card list, by the way, on josephryderanderson.com. It's under the card list section under the Union Arena dropdown. So go and check out everything that you won't see anywhere else. It's all of at least anywhere else in one place. It's all of the cards in the main set, all of the secret rare, alternate art, parallel rare cards as well, promos, and things of that nature. Take a look at that on the website. But the two cards that were cut were very interesting. One was this 0-cost Asuka, and the other was a 1-cost Mari. The Asuka was from the Yellow Evangelion deck, which has been tearing up the Japanese meta, whereas the Mari was from the very powerful WILLE deck. So those two are very, very strong decks, and noticeably the strongest deck, or at least one of the strongest decks that is in Evangelion was not hit. So I don't think that was unintentional. I don't think it was unintentional that Gaius did not get a hit. It wasn't like someone over there was sleeping on that deck is really strong. I think that the developers are okay with one overwhelmingly strong deck coming out. They probably just didn't want every single Evangelion deck to be overwhelmingly strong, because they don't. The whole point of Union Arena is different animes coming together to battle, right? And I think what you're gonna see by the end of this video is that there is very much an open playing field following these two sets that will prevent there being just an Evangelion rare battle in the upcoming mega tournaments. So I think that was the point of limiting the WILLE deck and the yellow Evangelion decks. And I do think that it does limit them. So beyond even just how much it impacts the decks, we're going to talk about all of that. The zero cost Asuka in my books is the bigger hit than the one cost Mari. But even psychologically, when we look at how these changes have been taken by the competitive Union Arena community in North America, these changes aren't taken super well. And I can give a great example of this. The first big cut that I really noticed was the zero cost Rukia. I think a lot of people noticed that one who are Bleach fans. A lot of us were really excited to potentially get the zero cost in the volume 2, and for some reason I think a lot of us assumed we would get it because it was dropped from the first set. We only recently got that zero cost Rukia, and that zero cost Rukia does make the Rukia Ichigo strategy quite a bit better. It's not massively better though, right? And yet losing that zero cost was enough for people to basically say, no, I'm not going to touch Ichigo Rukia because that zero cost isn't there. I'm not going to even touch it. Some other purple Bleach deck's better. And so I think that same kind of psychology is going to be present here in Evangelion, where even though, for example, the purple WILLE deck, it's not that deck gets so much weaker as it is. It definitely does get enough weaker that the top players are just going to go to Gaius. The top players are going to play Gaius because Gaius doesn't take a hit. It was already top tier in Japan. It's going to be top tier here, and it's not weakened at all. You can run it at full power. So a top tier player who wants to play the strongest deck in Evangelion is going to play that deck, and essentially that's going to drop the WILLE deck down a little bit in our meta. Now the Asuka, zero cost Asuka hit is a lot worse to the yellow Evangelion deck. There are very few decks, if any. Looking at my tier list, I don't think there's any top tier decks that don't have a zero cost draw one, sideline one. It's just such a basic card to be strong for your deck to be strong, is it just lets you see more cards from the get go. And in a game where any small advantage can make a big difference, that zero cost draw one, sideline one can mean the difference between losing a game and winning a game. So losing that is just not ideal. It's also going to be cutting down the number of named Asuka cards in your deck, making it harder to hit your special. So that, and there's not really a great replacement for her without hurting some of your other strategies. And you also lose another active trigger. So essentially that bumps Yellow Evangelion into still a higher tier range. It's still a strong deck, but it will not be S tier following these cuts. I think all of this was very intentional. I think we're going to have 2 S tier potential decks from Evangelion and 2 S tier potential decks from SAO, and they will combat it out with the 2 S tier decks from Rurouni Kenshin and another outlying deck that's also very strong. I think that's what we're going to see coming up in the tournaments ahead. But again, these are predictions. I will update the tier list on the website. You can find it at josephryderanderson.com. Under the Union Arena tab, it'll be the North America tier list. It is currently up to date with my predictions for SAO and Evangelion. As more top-level tournament data becomes available, I will certainly be updating it to reflect the current environment. So all of that being said, what are the strongest decks in Evangelion? We're going to go through the list, starting with the weakest first. And the weakest by a mile is the red Asuka and Mari deck. And it's not that this deck isn't good. It's actually pretty cool. And I think in any other set, it would probably be higher up. But Evangelion is just so strong that it takes the last place. This deck is really playing on the triggerless strategy that we saw in the Nikkei set, but taking it to a whole new level. In the Nikkei set, as cool as that mechanic is, it really never feels all that justifiable to drop the power of having triggers. But Red Evangelion makes a much stronger case for it. You have this Raid Asuka that lets you play a card based on how many that get you a card that you can increase the range of how strong it is based on how many triggerless cards you discard from your hand. So that's pretty cool. Definitely a good solid reward for running triggerless cards there. And then you have this really cool 3-cost Mari card that is kind of like the site in Nikkei, other than she just fits so seamlessly into your strategy. And this card is going to let you... I'll go ahead and read it for you. During your opponent's turn, if a card without a trigger ability is placed from your life area into your sideline, when you have 4 more cards without trigger abilities on your field, you may switch this active character to resting, which is pretty cool. So you can essentially turn all of your triggers, your triggerless cards, into a get trigger, which helps you get some really solid hand resources to come back with. She also has a strong win play that lets you draw 1, sideline 1, and 2 energy gen, as well as being a raid target. So she fits really, really well into your strategy. But I think the biggest payoff you're going to get from this triggerless strategy in this deck is actually this very powerful 5-cost character with damage 2 natively under the raid. It's a raid character. It's the Mari's Evangelion production model 2 beast form. It definitely lives up to its name. And this character can essentially have double attack at 7,000 BP, swinging through most active trigger buffs. And she has damage 2. So you're taking a double hit from damage 2 that you can't really stop very well. So that's pretty crazy. Definitely feels like a solid trade-off. It's just not nearly as strong as the other decks. In the number 5 spot from this set is yet another deck. Again, pretty strong. And any other set would probably be number 1 or 2. And that's the Kaworu and Shinji deck. This deck is themed after that, that whole thing that happens in the Rebuild series where Kaworu and Shinji team up. I just watched those movies recently, and they were super good, and I found whatever it was that they were trying to achieve with the spears very hard to understand. But if you love that part of the show or that part of the movies, and you're going to love this deck, these two guys team up, and it's all about fueling your sideline like other purple decks before it. You have like Muzan or the Father deck, or I guess Saitama kind of too. But it's all about boosting or fueling your sideline to boost these guys to damage 2, impact 4. And there's a lot of really neat ways to do that, making this one of the stronger decks of this strategy that we've seen to date. Very solid strategy. It also has this really powerful fake 2-cost character. It's another thing in Evangelion that does help it out a bit, is that there are a lot of really strong fake 2-cost characters that you get. You have one in the red that I didn't talk about. You do have one in the red Asuka deck, and then you also have this one in the Kaworu Shinji deck. And for those who aren't familiar with these fake 2-costs, they essentially count as a 0-cost in your hand if you have no other cards in your field. And why that's a big deal is that they have the power, very strong effects, kind of sort of in line with being a 2-cost character, but then they can also double as 0-cost, which means you don't have to run as many 0-costs. You can make more room you can get more value out of your cards. So you essentially unlock a 4-card slot in your deck by having these 2-costs. So it's a very bold card to have. Really, every deck should have one of these, and eventually they might. But this is a really strong card for this deck strategy. I'll read it to you. This Kaworu, when you switch it to resting, you can place this card face down under an Evangelion 13 card on your field, and if you do, draw 2 cards, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. So that unlocks sideline fuel, as well as very strong draw. And it also combos really well with the Evangelion 13, where the Evangelion 13 has this activate main where you can place 1 face down card under a card on your field into your sideline, and if you do, draw a card. So you can then send that Kaworu to the sideline and gain even more draw. So there's just a lot going on in this deck. Being able to boost that really strong 4-cost raid character to damage 2, impact 4 is certainly no joke, making it a solidly upper tier deck strategy. And now moving on to the deck that I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about and probably bummed about once they realize how much losing the zero cost Asuka is. And that's the yellow Evangelion deck. This has got to be the strongest raidless deck ever introduced into Union Arena. And really, it's pretty cool to see a deck like this enter the game, because you in a game like this where the raid mechanic is so overwhelmingly strong, it's really cool to see a deck that sort of subverts that norm through its own unique strategies. A couple of cards I really want to call out. I want to call out this Misato card first. And that's this 3-cost Misato that lets you, I'm going to read it to you. During your opponent's turn, if you activate a get trigger on an ability, a get trigger ability on a character card with fulfilled required energy, you may play that card set to resting onto your field instead. So what that's doing is that's letting you play one of your many characters with get triggers for free. That's an extremely powerful card. I love that card. I love that mechanic. I don't think we've had anything like that. And it's also a powerful offensive play because you'll have another 4K body on your field. This also removes the need to have raids, right? I mean, if you have, typically in a normal deck, you can do the same thing by having raid characters that you can raid off of for defensive, offensive sort of play. This lets you do this with non-raid characters very effectively. So this is a really cool mechanic to get in the game, and I'd like to see potentially more decks have this kind of a mechanic so you don't have to play a raid deck necessarily. The other card I really want to call attention to is the 4-cost Asuka Langley. And this card is super strong. There's a lot going on in this card. Essentially, you get to choose between 2 effects. And that's always, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Whenever you get to choose between 2 effects on a single card, that unlocks a lot of utility for you. So you can choose, one of them is to choose up to 1 character in your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. This could be a great counter to cards that maybe are anti-removal somehow. For example, like a Saitama. You're probably not going to run into a Saitama, but that's a good counter to that. And the other one is, if it's your turn, you may sideline 1 character on your field. And if you do, choose up to 1 character with 5,000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it, and reduce the AP cost of the next yellow character card with 2 or less required energy you use from your hand this turn by 1. So you're getting more plays with her. You're sidelining characters with her. Oh, and I forgot, when she's played, you also get to switch her to active. So she's coming in active as well as achieving these 2 powerful things for you. And then you can also furthermore place 2 cards from your hand to the sideline to bump her up to a 5K attacker with impact, so she can help you close out the game. The whole goal with Yellow Evangelion is just to move fast, hit hard, and then close out the game with some of your strongest raidless characters. The other interesting effect is on this Mari, this 4-cost Mari that I want to mention. So this is another one that's in line with that Misato effect. And this Mari, if on the front line and you activate one of your draw or active triggers, you may change it to a get ability instead. So you can actually combo that with your Misato to essentially play any character card set to active. It's a very, very strong combo. And you also get some more aggro with her. When she's attacking, you can switch one of your other characters to active who have already attacked. That's just so strong. Let's also take a look at this 4-cost Rei. When this character leaves the field due to battle or one of your opponent's abilities, you may place 1 card from your hand into your sideline, and if you do, you play up to 1 yellow Rei card with 2 or less required energy from your sideline set active on your field. Again, keeping that presence of characters on your field so you have plenty of bodies to attack with. Just super strong. You can see the aggro potential of this deck. Yeah, it's not going to do so great in the later game, especially against some of the strong decks that are out there, but you're not trying to get to the later game with this deck. You're trying to win towards the middle of the game and just rush down your opponent. But again, that would be a lot easier to do if you had the 1-cost Asuka. It's going to be or 0-cost, draw 1, discard 1 Asuka. In my list, just to get more names, I'm running the 2 of the 2-cost Asuka. It's pretty good, actually. You can use her to grant impact to any character on the field, which is pretty good, but definitely not a complete swap for the 0-cost Asuka. If the 0-cost Asuka hadn't been cut from the game, this yellow deck, with all the crazy shenanigans you can do with it, would definitely be S tier. So this would take the place of the other deck I have in S tier if it had that. But I think people are gonna be definitely gonna shy away from this deck given that cut that it gets. And it's not an insignificant cut. It's a cut that really is aimed at making this deck, in my opinion, aimed at making this deck not S tier, just for the sake of having more variety in our meta. Now, this deck is very, very strong, and it only loses the 1-cost Mari that lets you search for another WILLE card, but it doesn't just hurt you by losing that search from the WILLE. It also hurts you because you lose another WILLE affinity, which you're going to need in order to take advantage of your Raid Asuka effect. So essentially, the only card that really fits to replace that 1-cost Mari is this 1-cost Rei that lets you look at the top card of your deck and place it to basically lets you filter. But there really isn't another card that you can use to replace. You do also get still have a bunch of other WILLE cards, but what that's going to do by losing that Mari is it's going to slow this deck down and also make it a little less consistent. Again, with your Raid, you're really looking to have a bunch of WILLE affinity cards. Your Asuka Evangelion Raid, you're looking to have a bunch of WILLE affinity cards in your sideline so that you can grant your Asuka Evangelion double attack. Actually, triple attack. Absolutely crazy. So this deck really has a lot going for it. Not only are you pressuring your opponent with a potential triple attack from a 7,000 BP character, but you're also doing a ton of BP reduction with the aim of removing characters from the field with this BP reduction. It's really like a BP reduction on a level we haven't seen before. I think the only thing that comes close is maybe Byakuya. And in fact, the special for this deck is a lot like essentially the same thing as Byakuya's special. But the kinds of BP reduction you get with this deck just exceed any other purple deck we've seen or any other deck in Union Arena for that matter. And when you combine this kind of removal with the triple potential attack from Asuka, then it's a really, really deadly combo. Again, losing that 1-cost Mari isn't nearly as bad for this deck strategy as losing the 0-cost Asuka, but I do, again, think it's going to be enough that if players want to play the strongest purple deck in Evangelion, clearly they're going to go play Gaius because Gaius didn't get any cuts. It's working at full potential, which means that it's going to be just that much more effective in the very competitive post-Evangelion meta. Now, moving on to a deck that might seem a little surprising to some to be number 2, because it is typically considered to be not quite as strong as some of these other decks before those decks had their cuts. But I think given the nature of those cuts that were made, the red Shinji Rei deck is going to stand out as the other strong deck from Evangelion. So this deck does have a lot going for it. You can build it a lot of different ways, but probably the strongest is just to lean into the 7-cost and use this 7-cost to just pummel through a ton of damage into your opponent. This guy is going to be at 10,000 BP once you use this at his final attack. So you're basically going to use him to do multiple attacks, and then on his final attack, assuming he doesn't have any cards under him or under it, this is technically an Evangelion, it has Shinji on the picture, but it's technically his Evangelion. You're going to be swinging for 10,000 and impact 3. So in like a perfect scenario, you use him to attack once before or twice before. So your opponent has to either block at that point or not, depends, but they're probably going to want to block at that point because once he gets to the third hit, he's going to have impact 3, which just makes him basically you can't block that unless you have a nullify impact. So this is just putting a ton of pressure on your opponent. It makes it a really, really powerful late game closeout move. But in some ways, it's not even the strongest card. The strongest card arguably is the 6-cost Evangelion, Rei's Evangelion. And now this Evangelion piloted by Rei is gonna let you free play a Shinji or a Shinji's Evangelion. So that's what makes this Rei so strong. You also, of course, have plenty of consistency cards in this deck. You have a bunch of other Rei that you're going to use to use as the fuel for under Shinji so he can use his strong effects. You're going to essentially want those in the sidelines so that when he's played, you can add a bunch of them underneath him so you can then use them as essentially as draw. You get them back into your hand, and then you get to attack again, and then eventually use that 5,000 bonus plus impact 3. So really, really strong. But let's take a look at this 6-cost Rei a little bit more. So, if on the front line, you can sideline this card. So she's working as removal. Choose up to one character in your opponent's front line and sideline it. So not only is she acting as removal, then the next time you are going to play a Shinji or an Evangelion 01, you can play it for a reduced energy of 1 and active cost less of 1. So that means, for example, you can play the 7-cost Evangelion for 6 and for free. When she sidelines herself, you also get to draw more cards, so that's really strong. But you can also play this really powerful 2-action cost Shinji, who's your color trigger, and you can play him for just 1 action cost. So there's a lot of different combos to unlock with this, but I think really she's sort of the secret sauce. Is that 6-cost Rei. This deck really is all about these two siblings working together to bring about the third impact. I don't think it's a mistake that he has impact 3, right? The third impact 3 really makes this guy a chore to deal with, and might just be the strongest big guy deck we've seen in terms of all of the stuff it gets. It has a fake 2-cost, which is going to help it out a lot. Tons of filtering, tons of draw. It's just a really solid 2-cost Rei that gains double energy generation to start your next turn. Just a really, really strong deck. I think it's gonna really bring a lot of control back into the Union Arena English meta. But it's not even the strongest deck. As crazy as all that is, the strongest deck is actually the purple Gaius deck. And this deck, it really isn't that much like Purple Code Geass, so I probably shouldn't be making that comparison, but it does kind of remind me of Purple Code Geass, especially in terms of the kind of dominance it's probably going to have on the English meta for a while. It's going to definitely be the strongest deck in the English meta right away after Evangelion comes out. But one thing that's really interesting about this deck is that your biggest attacker, or your primary attacker is what I call them, your 7-cost Evangelion Test Type 1, the Spear of Gaius, it's not actually so much because of this card's offensive capabilities as much as its support capabilities that makes it so strong. Sure, it's an impact 1 5,000 BP character, which it's hard to deny that's strong, but it's really this effect that lets you draw and then play a purple character with 1 AP cost from your hand to your field, set to active, and you have an activate main that lets you do this once per turn again. So you have a draw engine, a free play for any purple card that's not raid, any purple character that's not raid, built into this 5,000 BP impact 1 body. That's just really, really strong. And so what you're going to do with this card is you're going to use it to play these really powerful raidless purple high energy cost characters that have really powerful effects too built in. For example, you have this 6-cost Asuka that you're going to play for free using that effect to active. She gains 1,000, has active trigger, and also when played, draw a card. And then you also have this Mari character that you're going to use this effect to play. And when attacking, you may place 1 card from your hand to your sideline. If you do, play up to 1 purple Shinji card with 3 or less required energy and 1 AP cost set to rest under your field. So you get even more free play. So you can essentially use this effect to convert low BP bodies into high BP bodies and use them to overwhelm your opponent. But it's not all that you have at your disposal. You also do have this AAA Wunder from the WILLE. This is very German themed, this set, but This character has a really powerful attack. Again, sorry to draw comparisons to the other purple mecha deck that once dominated Union Arena. But when played, this Wunder, AAA Wunder, gains your opponent must block this character's attacks if able until the end of the turn. That's very much like Gurren. Except for you don't need a character on the field to grant it that. Like a named character, you can do that whenever. When sidelined, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck and reveal up to 2 cards with 5 or more required energy among them and add them to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So that's really strong. It has search built into it. And then you also have another card worth mentioning is this powerful Misato character. Makes sense that she would be a very powerful supporting character since she is such in the movies. But this 1-cost Misato lets you grant impact or damage 2 to a 5-cost or more character. So you can use that to make your 6-cost Asuka a impact 1 or damage 2, depending on the situation. Your 5-cost Shinji, you can do that too. Your 6-cost Mari, and even most damagingly, the 7-cost Evangelion that you can convert into a damage 2 impact 1 character who also has insane support capabilities. As if all that weren't enough, one last thing is the Spear of Gaius. It's pretty crazy because it lets you sideline an opposing character, but also lets you draw a card. So it's acting as draw support and sideline. Unlike past cards like this, there's no you just always get to draw a card. Whether you sideline a 3,000 or a 5,000 BP character, you get to sideline. You get to draw a card. So this really is a whole new level of deck. It can do so much. I think the only slightly weak thing about it that I can think of is that it doesn't have a ton of draw filter in amongst its low cost characters. So what I mean by that is you do have the 0-cost draw 1 sideline 1 Shinji, which is enough, but then you're not getting more additional draw support until you get to your 3-cost Misato. So that's the only really drawback. But I think the high end draw is so high it makes up for that lower end draw. But that's the only big weakness. I think this deck could still suffer to aggro decks, can still suffer to the likes of Kenshin, but it definitely has a whole different power level than really anything we've seen before. Now, we've gone over every single deck now in the Evangelion set, and it's quite a powerful deck set, as you can see from that. But what I also want to look at is my predictions for the North American meta. I think a lot of people are curious about that. A lot of people have asked me about that. And these are my picks for the S tier decks following the release of both Evangelion and Sword Art Online. Both of these sets are releasing on the same day. And these are my predictions for what the top tier meta is going to look like. So we have Gaius as the overwhelming top deck. It seems very clear to me that it's going to be the top deck coming out of these two sets. But we also have the purple Unideck from SAO Volume 2 that I talked about in a previous video. I won't talk about it again here, but that deck is also very strong, very similar to Gaius in that it can do a lot of things in one deck that used to take several decks to pull out what this single deck can do. So the other new deck that's going to be coming into the S tier is the green GGO deck. I think we see a lot of hype for this deck already. It should be a massively played one coming up in the meta, as well as at the large tournaments. This deck has very, very powerful snipe capabilities that are even greater in some ways than Saito, who's also in the S tier. But it can snipe things with impact at a lower energy level than even Saito, making GGO a very strong and appealing deck. Red Kenshin should continue to fare well into this meta. It's a very powerful deck into a lot of the Evangelion decks. I think yellow can do pretty well into Kenshin, but given yellow's likely to see less play because of the cuts, Red Kenshin should be a pretty dominant deck going forward. Purple Saito should still do really well into the upcoming format. And my pick for the other S tier Evangelion deck is the Rei Shinji deck. That deck, because I think what players are going to see is that deck has all the pieces it needs. It didn't get any cuts. It's operating at full power, and I think that's going to be attractive to a lot of players. It already is really strong in Japan, and I think the fact it didn't get cuts, whereas the WILLE and WILLE Evangelion did get cuts, I think that positions the red, partly positions the red for players, in the minds of players, the red Evangelion deck a bit higher, as well as it's probably just going to take over as one of the top high energy decks. Should be pretty strong. I think it'll have a little bit of trouble with Kenshin for sure, or more aggro decks. And also, speaking of which, having these two new high energy decks like Gaius and Rei and Shinji, there's another deck that I think is going to do pretty well, and that's the Mina Reno deck. So originally I was pretty conservative on the Mina Reno deck, but I think that given this kind of a format with these heavy hitters, we're definitely in much more controlled territory than we used to be. Mina Reno has one of the strongest aggro plays in the game, if not the strongest, with the Reno into the Bako. And I think people are going to realize that and field Mina Reno to counter some of these heavier energy-reliant decks. Mina Reno also does fine into Red Kenshin. It should do pretty well into Gaius and Rei and Shinji, assuming it can get it going faster. Has no trouble dealing with 5,000 BP bodies. You can just rest those. And we'll have a little more trouble with Purple Yuna, GGO, and Saito. But I think it's decent matchup, favorable matchups, I would say, even into Gaius and Rei and Shinji should bolster it. And it goes pretty even into Red Kenshin. Not particularly amazing against Saito. I'd say Saito has the edge there. And arguably Purple Yuna probably has the edge too. But it should fare really well into this meta coming up. So again, find the full and complete tier list for all SAO Volume 2 decks and all Evangelion decks on josephryderanderson.com. Just navigate to the Union Arena tab or drop down, and it will be there under NA North America tier list. So lots of stuff coming out on January 30th. Lots of big tournaments coming up. Lots to be excited about. So I hope that helps you get an idea for what's going to be meta relevant post these two massive sets. And really, Union Arena will never be the same, but I'm here for it. I think it'll be pretty fun and exciting. So if you enjoyed that, like and subscribe on YouTube. Check out the podcast on any other podcast player you're on. And make sure to check out the website as well, josephryderanderson.com. And until next time, keep on battling.